Hello, my name is Cartograph, and I am a minor attracted person.
Okay, just starting off, this has become a really popular talking point currently, and I didn't really want to do a video on it, but the fact of the matter is that a lot of YouTubers are talking about it, including really popular YouTuber by the name of Shuonhead. She's the concubine of Armored Skeptic, or Greg. She's part of Armored Media. She's basically a pretty big YouTuber. She's kind of left-leaning. She makes political videos like on feminism, shit like that. Back in the day, she used to make atheist videos, all sorts of shit, basically. And recently, she tweeted out, less than a day ago actually, about how the fact that, like, her and Greg, they like to infiltrate, like, echo chambers. They've done a few videos on it. And recently, she managed to infiltrate what's called a MAP DM group. And I'll explain that more on Head in just a minute. But the fact of the matter is that I think Shuonhead's planning on doing a video on this because it only makes sense, because this has become a huge issue, and I think she's actually done a little bit of a video on it. Basically, the reason why these map groups are popping up now is because of Tumblr's decline. It used to be that these fuckers would be on the backwater of Tumblr, basically, and they're no longer around. So before we get started, really, I just want to make it obvious that MAP stands for Minor Attracted Person, and it's basically another way to say pedophile, but if you say minor attracted person, it's less likely to get the same reaction as pedophile, because with pedophile, it comes with a lot of stigma, and I'm not here to support, the abuse of children, alright? Plain and simple. But I just want to clear something up very quickly. Pedophile does not mean child rapist. Pedophile does not mean child molester. Pedophile just means they are attracted to children, which is something they need to get help with. Now, before we get into this, I've known about the MAP groups. I didn't have a name for them, but when I was younger, I remember watching an episode of Law and Order SVU where basically an IRL MAP group was going on, and one of the youngest person of the group was like, listen, we're just egging each other on, this group is supposed to help us, and yet we're just talking about our fetishes. And that's exactly what I want to talk about here. Minor attracted people, a lot of them, it seems like, are just using minor attracted person to rebrand pedophilia. It's honestly disgusting, because these groups are supposed to be helping each other, because if they go to a therapist, they're very likely going to get targeted by the police, and I can completely understand why the police are worried. The child rapist and child molestation rates are too high. They're too high for my liking, personally. But the point of these groups is not to talk about their fetishes, not to talk about their age of attraction like this group is talking about. It's not supposed to be talking about what they like about children. They're supposed to be like, say you go into a group, and you're supposed to say, oh, I saw a child in the grocery store today, and I almost had a close call, and then they go over what they felt and stuff like that. You're supposed to get help for it. It is a mental condition. You're not supposed to... It would be the equivalent of someone with Stockholm Syndrome going to therapy, and the therapist telling them to go to prison to visit their captor. That kind of shit. It is so fucking ass backwards. I can completely understand why people are angry at pedophiles, because most pedophiles, like I would say a good 70%, turn out to be child molesters or child rapists. But the fact of the matter is, not all pedophiles turn out that way. Some of them do want help, and for a long time... I'm sorry about the audio. Wondershare for More is not exactly the best place to do voiceovers, but I don't want to run this through Audacity again, unfortunately. I just wanted to go over this a bit better because it didn't really represent my situation that well in this clip here. I had to mute it. I struggled with predatory thoughts between the age of 12 and 14, 15 for like, I would say a 3 or 4 year period. I struggled with a lot of predatory thoughts because my father was a very predatory person when it came to sexual relationships. And I struggled with a lot of... I was afraid for a long period of time that I was going to turn out like him. So I kind of understand where pedophiles are coming from when they want to go get help and stuff like that. That's why I'm trying to be more sympathetic, is because I understand the mindset where you want to get help for something that you know is completely fucked up, but you can't help it, and you want to get help for it. So yeah, I just wanted to represent my situation better. I have no doubt within the year that there will be an explosion of pedophilia because of these groups. Because they're not helping each other, they're just talking about their fetishes, they're just talking about what they like, they're just egging each other on, and this is not healthy. This is fucked up. Like, this is going to explode. I wanted to talk about this. Now, before we go on with this video that I found, this is just a minor attracted person talking about the evolution of minor attraction. Whatever, we'll get on with that in a minute. But, again, let me reiterate, if you're struggling with pedophilic thoughts, get help. Get help, because if you don't, you're going to end up being a predator. You need to get help before that happens, alright? Plain and simple. That being said, predators, they need to be thrown in jail. In fact, I would not feel bad for them if they got the shit kicked out of them in prison and they ended up bleeding out on the fucking concrete floor of a prison cell. They should be thrown in prison, and they should be left to the devices of all those fucked up people in prison. Because there are plenty of people in prison, I'm sure, that would like nothing more than to beat the fuck out of a few child rapists. Alright, just my personal opinion, I don't feel bad for any child predator. Let's talk about the fact that a lot of minor attracted people want to be included in the LGBTQ community. I guess I can see why people are angry about it, because they don't want to be. For years, conservatives have been comparing gay men and shit like that to pedophiles and zoophiles and shit like that, right? And it's not fair because they're nothing like them. But let's talk about the fact that transgender people do have a mental condition called body dysmorphia. And I'm not, discrediting trans people, obviously. And I'm sure that this video is probably on the ass end of public opinion. But I'm just, putting it out there. Transgender people do suffer from a mental condition called body dysmorphia and gender dysmorphia. And again, they have to go to therapy. They have to work it out. They have to reconcile their body with their mind. And I think that it's relatively similar with pedophilia. You need to get help for it, otherwise it's just going to fuck with your entire life. Pedophilia is a mental condition. You don't want to feed that. You don't want to give in to that. You have to go to therapy. You have to get help. But the resources for pedophiles is so limited. So basically you'll have a bunch of fucking pedophiles being closeted, and they get more and more built up, and then they end up being predators because there's no resources for them. The best thing that you can do is just ignore it, and that's not healthy. It's not healthy to ignore, your mental condition. If I ignored my depression and shit like that, it would only get worse and worse. You have to deal with these things, but the resources are so limited for them. And the resources that are there are like these fucking groups where it's not actual mental health. Sorry, I'm getting really worked up about this because it's so fucking disgusting what these people are doing. They brand themselves as support groups, but in reality they're just fucking rings of pedophiles. It's so fucking stupid. Anyways, that was just my brief interlude of 12 minutes. But now we're actually getting into the video.
I'm here to provide information regarding minor attraction, answer questions, counter arguments, and try to provide a place for people to come and discuss a taboo and oftentimes difficult topic.
He's completely correct in this. This topic is so fucking closed and shut for a lot of people. Either you're a pedophile or you're not. It's just that simple. It's really sad, actually. If I get it, okay? When we think of pedophiles, we think immediately of the worst possible fucking people. And I get it. 70%, in my personal opinion, I don't know the exact statistics, but 70% of pedophiles will probably end up being child predators. I get it, okay? I get it. It's fucked up. You want to protect children? Sure, that's great. I am more, shake hands on the fact that 70% of pedophiles turn out to be child rape. But at the same time, we need open platforms to talk about this. Otherwise, people are just going to continuously turn into child predators. In this case, we need an open platform to talk about this. We need to be able to call out those people that are just encouraging, predatory actions.
I am a huge fan of evolutionary theory. I love thinking about how things evolved and why. I look at the majesty of nature and I see a plethora of beautiful things. I think about the easily visible things, like claws of cats or the speed of mice, like the bark of a tree or the beak on a bird, and I realize these things adapted themselves to each other, which in turn adapted to them. I think about the microscopic parts of each of these, and I know they came about through millions of generations of mostly failure. Evolution is one of my favorite topics in the world, and so I'm going to share my thoughts on the evolution of minor attraction. Please note that while I've put a lot of thought into all of the following opinions, they are just that, opinion. I do not claim them to be authoritative, and encourage you to look into this yourself and draw your own conclusions. With that said, I think I'll first give an intro to evolution. There are a few ways to describe evolution, but the broadest and most accurate is gradual change over time.
This guy's kind of falling into a pit, and I'm not the smartest guy in the world, and I'm not going to profess to know everything about science, but from my understanding, he's kind of mixing up evolution and evolution. When we're talking about, biological evolution, we're not talking about the evolution that he's talking about. What kind of evolution he's talking about is the progression of things, right? Like, the evolution of the car and the evolution of the bike is not anywhere similar to biological evolution. And again, my understanding is very simple, but he's kind of mixing those two terms up, which is already spelling disaster for whatever he's going to talk about. But let's give him a shot.
That doesn't get us very much, does it? We need to go deeper. While it would be inaccurate to say that there is a goal to evolution, given that it's a natural process, not a conscious one, it can be said that reproduction is absolutely its main driving factor. With every generation that passes on its genes, there's variation, which is evolution at work. Initially, this was done with cell splitting and having mutations in a genetic code affect the success of that generation. And later there was genetic swapping as well, and probably others. But I'm not well read into microbiology to know for sure. Eventually, there was a change in the way each generation passed on its genes. I don't know the way it evolved, but sex proved to be an excellent driver for evolution, given that it combined similar complementary genetic codes into new ones, and thus increased the variation available in a given population. I'm not going to get into genetic diversity, or genetic drift, or even speciation. For my conclusions, the only thing you need to know is that evolution favors sex in macroscopic organisms. The method of sex is often different, but the effect is still the same. More sex means more children, means those genes are more likely to last on an evolutionary scale. Of course, sex isn't the only thing selected for. For example, some squirrels will give up their lives to save their families. This is likely selected because the genes that would encourage that behavior live on in brothers and sisters and children. So protecting the family is also favored, as is protecting the weaker in the species, normally children. There are also things selected against. Pointless suicide is usually selected against because there's no advantage to it. That's why you don't see many species nowadays with a habit of killing themselves for absolutely no reason. Celibacy, or sexual shame, is also selected against, because sex leads through the reproduction of genes, so genes that stop sex stop their own replenishment. Okay, with that out of the way, let's look at minor attraction. What evolutionary advantages does it have? What are the disadvantages of not having it? Are there similar mechanisms in place as proof of concept? Could it be a consequence of other mechanisms? The first two questions here are linked. The lack of an advantage can be looked at as a disadvantage, and vice versa. So to simplify, I'll be taking an additive approach. I won't use the lack of an effect as its opposite. I'll also try to apply these to the orientation.
Okay, right off the bat, again, I don't think it's accurate to lump minor attraction with evolution. I don't think it's very responsible to do that. But, again, there is no... Okay, I'm trying to give this guy the benefit of the doubt, but already he's trying to advocate for minor attraction, which isn't something you want to do as a minor attracted person. That is a terrible thing to do. Are you seriously going to make a case that we should all be pedophiles? That is seriously fucked up. That is beyond fucked up. Okay, I was hoping he would talk about the disadvantages of it, and I really hope he does, because right now it's sounding like he's just advocating for it, which isn't something you want to do, because of the fact that it's not something that people should want to aspire to. Minor attraction is a mental condition. That would be like people advocating for depression, or people advocating for mania or bipolar disorder or any sort of mental condition. Like, this is not something people want. This should not be something that you want. Alright, let's continue.
Not to any specific species. Minor attraction has a direct benefit of preparing children for a world that includes sex. Probably a lot of sex, which would likely first occur with the minor attracted individual, who would effectively show them the ropes. If so, there's an increased chance of that individual's genes being passed on. There's the benefit of bonding. In species that mate for life, or include bonded pairs, or parenting, being the first to bond with a mate.
Okay, again, that literally just sounds like you're advocating for the fact that we should be fucking our children so they can be ready to fuck when they're older. That is such an age-old, Bronze Age fucking mentality. Alright, look. Less than 100 years ago, it was completely alright. It was completely alright to burn a black man at the stake. Like, it wasn't forbidden. It was completely alright to beat the living crap out of what they would call a tranny or a weirdo or whatever. It was completely alright to do these things. But the reason why we don't do them now is because mentality has completely fucking changed. It is so stupid to imply that we should be fucking our children to prepare them for fucking. That's not realistic, because when those children are at that age, they don't understand what sex is. They don't understand what it is or what it means. Most children that are subjected to pedophilia are not going to grow up with a healthy sexual drive or sexual life. This is stupid. I would say there's some correlation between pedophilia and, pedophiles. I would say that if a child is subjected to pedophilia, they might grow up to be pedophiles. And I don't have, like, a statistic offhand, but I think there is some correlation there. And I guess in your case, you would want that. You would want more pedophiles, and that's not something you should be advocating for. Most minor attracted people that are even somewhat sympathetic are advocating against it. They don't want more people to have minor attraction. They want less people, because it is such a fucking mental fuck up.
Is a determining factor in whether or not those genes get passed on. By being attracted to them before the more teleophilic members of the species, they gain that extra edge.
It is a fallacy of a statement to say that we should be fucking our children to prepare them for fucking. Show them the ropes. They're children. They're children. They don't need to know about sex for a little while longer. If you want to have a discussion about the fact that, children are getting sexualized at younger and younger age, sure, we can have a discussion about that. But the difference is that we have consent ages, and we have shit like that to prevent children from, being abused. I'm sorry, but showing them the ropes, you've got to be fucking kidding me. That's just so fucking dumb. They're children, they don't need to know this shit. So during the recording, I didn't exactly go over this particularly well, but I do want to go over it now because I'm going over the thing, and basically I do a lot of repeating, and I apologize if I don't cut it out during editing. But I did want to go over some of his statements instead of just saying, oh, it's dumb, oh, this is retarded, and blah, blah, blah. So basically what this minor attracted person is saying is that the reason why we should be having sexual relations with our children is because by the time that they're at what he says is teleolithic age, which is basically like the normal age, the mature age for sexual relations, is we can procreate more. And if you had been born more than a few hundred years ago, you'd be completely right. Even I have to say, I think anyone would have to agree that if we were born a few hundred years ago, yes, we would need to procreate as much as possible. I would even say, even though it's kind of fucked up, if we were a few hundred years ago, I would say abortion should be restricted for a lot of reasons, because of the fact that without procreation, our species would very much die out. But we're not we're not in the fucking 1600s, alright? We don't need to procreate We have an overpopulation issue. I don't know if you know this, and I'm pretty sure I go over this later in the recording, but we have a little bit of a overpopulation issue here in the world. For Christ's sakes, China has restrictive laws preventing people from having too many children that are female. I think that's evidence enough that there's an overpopulation issue here on Earth. I think that if a few people don't procreate, or that if we take longer to procreate, I don't think that would be a loss. I think if anything that would benefit us, it would be less of a strain on our resources. That's not how it is anymore. It just doesn't make sense. It's irrelevant. If an 18-year-old still hasn't fully developed mentally, but a 70-year-old pedophile, 70-year-old predator, they know how to manipulate people. They could manipulate an 18-year-old. They could manipulate a 17, 16-year-old. I don't think 18 and 16 are that big of a difference to the 18-year-olds all grown up and, you know, they have the complete mental awareness that they need to avoid being, you know, predatorized. Predated, I should say. I will agree with you there that, you know, the ages are completely stupid when it comes to laws, but, again, you don't want to be advocating for pedophilia for a lot of fucking reasons. But if we're going on the evolution basis, if we're going on a biological, you know, scientific basis, again, the infanticide rates and the death and childbirth rates get higher as the age goes down, I would say. I don't know how many statistics I can find based on the fact that, you know, pedophilia is largely against the law in most countries. But yeah, I don't understand why you'd be advocating for that, not only on a moral basis, not only on a intellectual basis, but also on a scientific basis. Because if you're advocating for it on a scientific basis, then you think you pass more genes on, and you'll be preparing children for sex, which is, again, so fucking stupid of a statement, but let's just take that as your statement. Again, I've already stated this. The younger you get, more deaths in childbirth.
Another benefit is resource sharing. In social species, resources are shared based on many metrics. And this doesn't just mean food or shelter, it can also mean protection, sleep, or privacy. There's a suggestion that homosexuality...
Oh no, he's about to say that minor attracted people have a correlation with homosexual people. Basically the same thing that people would tell gays.
...evolved to better provide this sharing. With no children of their own, they make great babysitters and are just as willing to defend their nieces and nephews from aggressors as their father.
Okay, I haven't heard this particular theory, I'll be honest with you, but I guess that makes sense in a strange way, that homosexuality evolved to have better caretakers and shit like that for the other families. Honestly, I was always a fan of the theory that homosexuality evolved in, to combat, you know, overpopulation. That was always my personal theory. But besides that, pedophilia does not equate to homosexuality. The difference is that homosexuality is between two consenting individuals, two individuals that are of age, two individuals that have the mental maturity to say, oh, we want to be together. You're talking about people under the age of, I am going to assume under the age of 14, and you're talking about people that don't have the mental maturity to know that saying yes or no means yes or no. They just know social cues. So if you're trying to cue them to say yes, of course they're going to say yes. But does that mean they actually want what you're, you know, trying to get them to do? No. Children are children. We raise them, we teach them because they don't know better yet. You cannot say that a child under the age of 14, hell, under the age of 16, has the mental awareness to say yes or no. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm sure there are children out there that have the mental maturity at their age. You know, I'm sure there's a 12-year-old out there that actually knows. But that doesn't fucking mean that we need to encourage pedophilia, because most of the time, pedophilia is non-consenting, right? Like, I'm sure, and I know this is terrible to say, but it's just a fact that I'm sure there are children out there that know the difference. I'm sure there's a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 12-year-old that knows what no and yes means, and I'm sure they know what they're getting into, and I'm sure they have the mental awareness for it. But the problem is that those are outliers, right? We can't legalize pedophilia because I'd say a majority of children don't know. The reason why we have consensual ages is because those children are outliers. And, I'd say it's a little bit unfair to those outliers that they can't choose what they want to do. But at the same time, they're still minors. They need, they still don't have complete independence.
A similar thing could be said about minor attraction. Minor attracted individuals are more willing to give their support to the families of their mate, and will be more willing to risk their health or lives to protect them, much like a teleophile would do so for their mate.
So basically what he's saying is that minor attracted people have the same, desire to protect their family as, regular people. Basically, teleophile means people that are attracted to consenting individuals. I've heard that teleophile is used as a slur towards, cis, regular people, basically, by minor attracted people. It definitely seems like that here, but putting that aside, what is your logic? Most minor attracted people that I can think of are outliers in a community. They're completely isolated. Whether or not they participate in pedophilic relationships is irrelevant. They're always, isolated. Most of the time. There are a few times where they're the head of a community or something like that, but again, I guess I see it. You're literally admitting that it's not exclusive to pedophilic individuals for them to have care for their people. And I'm not going to say that I'm certain there are pedophiles that don't participate in child predation, that get help for their disease. I'm sure that they actually care about children, because if you didn't care about children, you would conform to your lust and you would become a predator, right? There are pedophiles that go against child predation and focus on helping children, because if they didn't care about children, they would just give in to their, predatory needs.
This, in turn, increases the likelihood of that family accepting him or her, and his or her offspring, and therefore keeps the genes viable into successive generations. I'll take a brief detour from minor attraction itself to talk about its flip side, childhood sexuality. A big benefit to having children as sexual beings is that there won't be a delay in mating when they reach puberty. There'll be nothing new to learn, except for being pregnant, but by then, the genes have already been passed on?
The reason why... Okay. Listen. Cartograph. Listen. The reason why... I'm gonna go on a limb here and say that besides morality, the main reason why there's that delay now is because of overpopulation. We're already, losing space. For Christ's sakes, we're trying to send people to Mars because we don't have enough space anymore. And the space that we do have is polluted and toxic. The reason why, besides morality, I would think that we have this delay in sexual maturity now, and the sexual, awareness, is because we don't want to overpopulate the goddamn Earth. You made this video in 2016. 2016 was 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago. But it's irrelevant because even in 2016, overpopulation was a huge fucking issue. During that period, we'll have some deaths from all sorts of reasons, and those deaths can then be filled up by births. You get what I'm saying? It's already terrible. We don't need more births than deaths, is what I'm trying to say here.
There's also a bunch of likely benefits to child sex. Now I'll talk about the negatives of a purely adult-attracted species, or more specifically, why it just doesn't make any sense. First, at what point is an animal considered an adult? There are no hard and fast rules in nature that govern this kind of thing, unlike with humans.
You're assuming that humans are completely animals, but the reason why we're having this discussion is because humans have the mental awareness to have metacognition, basically. We have the ability to think about how we think, and we have the ability to say, therefore I am. We have these abilities, so we also have the ability to make rules about our own species. You're completely correct that we have played hard and fast with consensual ages and shit like that. But that's because morality changes. That's because the people's opinions change. And the current thought process is that we don't need children to bear children, because we have enough children. We have enough mothers. We have enough fathers. We have enough birds. Alright? So that's the difference here. The reason why sea turtles and shit like that, the reason why animals have a consistent age is because they don't have the ability to question that age, right? They don't have the ability to say, oh, this is just a child, I probably should not have sex with it. They don't have that ability to say that sort of shit. But we do. That's why we do. It's because we can. And I don't know why this is such a complex thing for you to understand.
A good place to set adulthood of animals would be physical maturity. This occurs soon after sexual maturity, so we can consider that as puberty. Already, we can see the problem of missed opportunity. Eggs are not fertilized, and there's more time before sex that the creature has to potentially die. A species could certainly survive like this, it's just very unlikely that it would evolve this way. What if we choose sexual maturity as adulthood? Well, first, that's like suggesting a 12-year-old human is an adult, with some debate. And second, this is the case for most members of a given species. There is often a little bit of forewarning before peak fertility in females, and males are often always fertile, so there's very little chance of lost opportunity for reproduction. So, where are the disadvantages? In this case, it's down to circumstance. For example, in harem species, not bothering to attract pre-adults can lead to a smaller harem, and thus less reproduction. In solitary species, ignoring near adults could mean not being close enough to reproduce when they hit adulthood. And I've already explained some of the benefits that we've missed out in social species.
But we have medicine, we have science, we have all sorts of shit that helps counteract deaths and encourage birds. We do not need more birds, because sooner or later, it's already happened in China, but sooner or later here in the western states, in the western countries, we're not going to be able to decide how many children we have because we're having too many. In China, you're not allowed to have more than one baby girl. And that's because of overpopulation over there.
So, what about similar mechanisms to prove concept? Well, there's homo and bisexuality, fetishes, parenthood, and protective instinct. In humans, at least. Let's go through these, shall we? Homo and bisexuality provide proof of concept by showing it's possible to deviate from the norm of a species sexually. They prove that it's possible to evolve a trait that doesn't add directly to an individual's chance to reproduce. They show that sexuality isn't a clear-cut black and white issue. Fetishes further this proof by expanding the types of variations from the norm there are. In addition, fetishes like gerontophilia and age play show that different ages can be sexually attractive to an individual.
Basically what Cartograph here is saying is that bisexuality, homosexuality, and fetishes like age play show that sexuality can deviate. Okay? I'm willing to accept that. I think most people can accept that. But there is a very clear line between sexuality, deviation, and crimes. I think most people can admit that sexuality is a very nebulous thing. It's very hard to pin down. You can't just say it's one thing or another. For a long time, people didn't really recognize homosexuality as even a choice, and even now most people don't even recognize bisexuality as a choice either. So I'm willing to admit that there is probably some room for deviation, but you're implying here that pedophilia is an acceptable form of deviation, which is very it's a slippery slope fallacy, to be completely honest with you. Yes, age play and, homosexuality and bisexuality, yes, those are acceptable forms of deviation. You know why they're acceptable forms of deviation? It's because they're between consenting individuals. Now, you want a more comparable term to pedophilia? How about rape? How about rape? Would you want rape to be legalized? Would you want it to be normalized? That's the real question here. Because that's more comparable. Because rape is between someone that doesn't consent, and more importantly, when they can't consent. Like, for example, in some United States territories, it is considered rape to have sex with a female or male that is too drunk to be able to consent, legally. So, that's a thing. Now, I know a lot of minor attracted people will probably say that, some children, depending on their age and shit like that, they might consent. But the problem here is that that still is statutory rape. That is still not consensual. That person doesn't have the capacity to consent yet. So that's the difference there. Rape and pedophilia are non-acceptable forms of sexual deviation.
Parenthood itself isn't a proof of concept for minor attraction, but rather shows that love for children can occur. The love of a parent is obviously different to the romantic love of a map. However, they are not so far removed as to be unrelated. That parents love their kids above all others shows that such a degree of love can occur. Tying into that, protective instinct can also prove that it's possible to love and care for children, even those that aren't your own. Why protect something you don't care about? How could it be instinct, but not evolved? Now, any of these things, or the things that cause them, could have given rise to minor attraction, or even possibly a combination of them. I'd put my money on whatever caused the evolution of homosexuality, but I don't know for certain.
Okay, the difference between a parent loving their child and a pedophile loving their child is pretty apparent.
The original, so...
A parent doesn't want to, normally, they don't want to fuck their children, but a pedophile does have that urge. That's just a fact. Pedophiles are attracted to children. That's literally what the root words mean. The difference is that the parent isn't attracted to their children. They just love them familially. They're completely enough removed to be unrelated. Romantic and familial love is so fucking diverse. I don't understand how you can equate the two as being even somewhat similar. Because, okay, again, as I've explored sexuality, I completely understand the difference between romantic, familial, and sexual attraction. Alright? There's a difference between loving, your best friend, loving your girl or boyfriend, and loving your cousin. Right? There's a completely difference between those three things, right? One's romantic, one's romantic, one's familial, one's platonic, one's sexual, stuff like that. There's a difference between those, and the fact that you're trying to equate familial love with romantic/sexual love is just so fucking stupid. They're not connected at all. Mostly because, at least in a lot of cases that I understand, even romantic and sexual love are pretty detached, because there are asexuals that are still romantic, and there are aromantic people that still enjoy sex. Again, they're very diverse. You can't just equate them to each other, especially when there's no direct connection. You want to protect that child, you want to see them grow, you want to see them succeed. I have that sort of love for my niece. I'm her uncle. I want to see her grow up. I want to see her succeed. I want to see her do well. I want to see her become smarter and stronger and faster. I want to see her become what I know she can be. But that is completely fucking different from wanting to fuck them, from having an attraction to them. That is completely different, and it's really fucked up that you're suggesting that they're even somewhat similar.
Okay, I know I rushed through that last bit, but this video is getting long, and I'm already late in releasing it. It's fucking 2 AM. I won't get into the social evolution of minor attraction here, but I'll do it in an upcoming video. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, or it gave you cause to think, please click that like button. If you want to see more, why not subscribe? And if you have an issue with my argument, or you want to show your support, please comment below. Until next time, always remember, if you're lost in a sexual landscape, make sure you have a moral compass and consult your map.
Alright, so to close this out, Cartograph, I don't think, at least I'd like to hope that you're not a bad guy. I hope that you're anti-contact, and I hope that you're not putting any children in danger or hurting any children. That's what I truly hope.
Actually.
I know that a lot of MAP people have direct access to children, and it terrifies me because
I don't
as
know.
a MAP, you should recognize that
I just know I was
mental
so
condition that
scared
you're
as well.
suffering with, you have to
And I
police yourself.
definitely defended
Please,
him, 'cause I couldn't stand
please,
that
I
guy.
hope that you're anti-contact. Now,
You know, it's
I have a
like
lot
the
of problems
worst
with what
one
you
out of
said,
all of them.
but
Like,
to
at
be
least I
honest,
could
I was much
deal
more
with the
heated
guy.
during my
Holy
live
crap,
commentary
shit
and
is
live
beyond
reaction.
bad.
I've never done this type of video before, but it's been blowing up, and I wanted to
Stupid.
examine a microcosm of the MAP groups. I
It's like the
really
guy
don't
literally for
think
the
that
first
maps
time
are
in his life
inherently, like, intrinsically
computer.
bad, but your arguments almost sound like a contact pedophile. Like, you sound like you're advocating for child predation, and it is rather disconcerting. During my live
Oh, you
recording, I
had
did get
trouble
really
with
fucking
Steam.
pissed about it, but the truth is, I don't know you personally, and I'm going to have to side with my optimism rather than my pragmatism here, and hope that you're a anti-contact pedophile and that you're not
Doesn't
putting
seem
anyone
like
in
he was just having
danger.
things done for him.
Just please consider stopping advocating for MAP. It's just not something you want to advocate for. If you want to explain the mentality of it, I don't think anyone would fucking complain, but this is just monstrous, what you've done here. Like, are you not self-aware enough to realize that you
He
are
said he
you
had
are
so much
suffering from a
trouble
mental
getting
condition
Steam
known as
to,
pedophilia?
like,
Like,
trying to figure out how to install
I know
Steam.
that this is rather controversial to
It
say,
took
at least
6
among
weeks,
liberal
I think, to
groups,
figure it out.
but even trans people suffer from a
Took
mental
him
disorder,
6
which
weeks
is
to
body
finally figure it
dysmorphia.
out.
I can't recall
And
if
he
I
had
went
to
over this in my live
spend
commentary,
years
but the fact of the matter is that even trans people suffer from a mental condition, and a lot of liberals and a lot of trans people tend to get upset when you point that out. But it's not a bad thing to have a mental condition. Period.
That
It's
was
just not.
probably
You just have to be careful,
not
and
the
you have to
stupidest
mind
thing
it.
they
You have to
said.
work at it.
So that-
You
that-
have to
that pushed
battle
the
it.
limit.
If you have depression, you
Of the
can't
stupidest
wallow
things
in
he said at
self-hate.
the moment.
If you have bipolar
Those
disorder,
stupid
you
things.
can't indulge
That's
yourself
just
in the
what he
extremes.
costs.
If you have body dysmorphia, you need to learn to reconcile your mind and your body. And if you have pedophilia, you need to learn to restrict yourself, keep yourself away from children, and try to live a normal life. Combat those urges. You don't want to advocate for it because it sounds like you're encouraging it. And encouraging it might lead to people, especially among the MAP groups, normalizing it. This is not a normal condition. This is not a good condition. Please reconsider advocating for this because it was really disconcerting. Now, putting that aside, I do want to reiterate that this is the first type of video I've ever done on this sort of situation, but the MAP blow up currently has been really bothering me because I've said it multiple times during this recording, but I've struggled with predatory thoughts. So it really hit home when people exploded, and instead of saying, you know, this is a fucked up situation and I'm trying to deal with it, I see a lot of MAP people advocating for it, trying to normalize it, trying to integrate into the LGBTQ. And as I said, I understand why the LGBTQ plus people don't want to be associated with the MAP group. Mostly because of the fact that for a long time, it's what conservatives would throw at the LGBT people. They would say, oh, what are they going to do next? They're going to be fucking children. They're going to be fucking their dogs. You know, that's the kind of shit they did. I get why the LGBT people don't want to integrate with you, but I also understand that, much like transgender people, pedophilia and pedophiles are suffering from a condition and they need help, and integrating with the LGBTQ community could very much help with that situation. So I don't know if you're a good or bad person. I just know that you're the first and the largest microcosm I could find of the situation. And I do hope you make a response video. I do hope you respond in the comments. I will do my best to respond to you as quickly as possible. You were encouraging people to make responses to you. And I am going to probably comment this on your video. But I also am going to try to, publicize this and get this, more around, because not a lot of people have been talking about the MAP situation, I see, at least from my experience. Anyways, Zerganians, if you like the video, please rate, comment, like, and subscribe.